This weekend started just like any other Saturday. Jack woke up a little later than usual and gave his wife of 17 years, Laura, a gentle morning kiss. She grumbled, "Jack, let me sleep. I can't catch a break with you, either at night or in the morning." Then she added, "The kids are probably awake by now." Jack replied, "You're right, but they're grown. They won't come barging into our bedroom anymore." He got out of bed, put on his robe, and headed to the bathroom. On his way, he heard noise and commotion coming from their eldest daughter, Olivia's room. He realized that her younger sister, Sophie, was pulling her out of bed, so he decided to leave them to it. After freshening up, he got dressed and made his way to the kitchen. By the time he got there, his daughters were already sitting at the table, clearly having grown tired of waiting. Olivia asked, "Are we having breakfast today?" Sophie added, "We're hungry, and we still have school, right?" Jack shook his head and laughed. "School? You're on winter break. You're going to Grandma's today, remember?" Olivia inquired, "And you? You're off for the weekend?" Jack smiled. "Yeah, but your mom's making the decisions." Sophie sighed. "We could make breakfast ourselves, but Mom won't let us. She thinks we'll mess up the kitchen and burn everything." Jack teased, "How about oatmeal or semolina porridge?" "Your pick." Olivia said, "Oatmeal, please." Jack smiled. "Oatmeal it is, miss. But make sure to wash your faces and brush your teeth. Breakfast will be ready in 15 minutes. While Jack prepared breakfast, Laura came out of the bedroom and headed to the bathroom. By the time the girls were seated, she returned, her hair neatly combed. Jack glanced at her, still appreciating her beauty after all these years. Laura sat down and said to the girls, "Finish up and get ready. Dad's taking you to Grandma's." Olivia frowned. "Mom, you promised we'd go to the ski center for the week. We've been preparing for it." Laura responded, "Plans change. We'll go during spring break." Jack wasn't happy about sending the kids to his mother-in-law, especially after the change of plans. Something about the situation felt off, and he had noticed a growing distance between him and Laura ever since her new boss, Mark, came into the picture. He knew they had known each other in college, but she hadn't mentioned him much, and that worried Jack. Still, he trusted his wife, even though he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. He'd considered meeting with Mark to clear the air, but decided it would only make things worse. That morning, Jack had slipped a small recorder into his pocket, preparing himself for the conversation he sensed was coming. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something about Laura's sudden decision to send the kids away felt like a red flag. After breakfast, Jack went to the bathroom, turned on the recorder, and returned to the kitchen. Laura sat silently for a moment before finally saying, "Jack, we need to talk." Her words left no doubt in Jack's mind that the conversation wouldn't be a pleasant one. He sighed. "What's going on?" Laura smiled briefly but then grew serious. "You know I love you, right? I've loved you for all these years. But I've been thinking about our relationship, and I don't want us to drift apart." Jack looked at her, confused. "Laura, what are you trying to say?" She continued, "I've been reading about what causes problems in marriages. I don't want us to end up like that, so I think we should be proactive, maybe even see a counselor." "I've been thinking about this for a while," Laura began, "and I believe we need a break from our marriage. We should take some time to explore ourselves, other experiences, and maybe other people. That way, when we come back together, we'll have a fresh perspective that might strengthen our relationship." Jack stared at her, stunned. "How long are you talking about? A month? A year?" "No, nothing that drastic," Laura replied. "I think a long weekend, this holiday break, would be enough." Jack's face grew tense. "So, that's why the kids are going to your mom's instead of the ski trip we planned? All for this break?" Laura looked away. "We could have sent them to your parents, but I already made arrangements with my mom." Jack's heart pounded in his chest. "So, you and your lover came up with this whole plan to make it sound reasonable, huh? Just so I'd agree to give you the weekend to be with him?" Laura's bold suggestion left Jack utterly shocked, though not entirely surprised given the suspicions that had been growing inside him. Still, hearing it from her cut deeply. "Jack, I don't know what you're getting at," Laura said calmly. "I don't have a lover." "You're overreacting." Jack shook his head. anger rising in his voice. Don't lie to me. I'm talking about Mark, your new boss. The guy you had a fling with back in college, and now he's your boss again. Funny you never mentioned that to me. Laura frowned. Mark, you're mistaken. I've told you, nothing has changed. I still love you. This is just about giving each other space. Nothing has changed? Jack's voice was bitter. Everything has changed, Laura. Your attitude toward me, toward the kids. It's all different now. I love you, Jack, she said, her tone softening. I'm not sure what you think is going on, but there's no need to drag divorce into this. Jack's eyes narrowed. Divorce? How do you think you'll explain all this to Olivia and Sophie? What do you think they'll say if we split up? We're not getting divorced, Jack, Laura said firmly. This is just a small break. Our parents don't need to be dragged into this, and neither do the kids. Sociology is one thing, Laura, Jack muttered. But you're complicating everything with this so-called plan. I can't go along with this. Fine, Laura sighed. Let's postpone this conversation until later. Take the girls, drop them off, and come back. We'll sit down and work things out. No, Jack said coldly. There's nothing left to resolve. I'm leaving. You can't just leave, Jack, she protested. I can and I will, Jack said firmly. I'm not doing this. I've just decided I'm done. But I said we'll talk when you get back, Laura insisted. You enjoy your weekend, Laura, Jack said, grabbing his things. I'll be driving the girls around while you consult with your friend Mark. Just then, Olivia came into the kitchen. Daddy, we're ready to go. I'll be ready in 5 minutes, Jack replied. He quickly dressed, grabbed his laptop and backpack, and without another word to Laura, headed downstairs. He started the car, letting it warm up as the girls hopped into the back seat. Laura stood by the window, watching, looking confused. Jack carefully pulled out onto the main road, and the car was silent for a while before Olivia finally spoke. Daddy, Grandma lives in the other direction. I know, honey, Jack said, but you were promised a ski trip, and that's where we're going. We'll figure out the rest later. Dad, Sophie asked quietly, are you and Mom getting a divorce? Jack clenched the steering wheel. Why would you say that? We overheard you and Mom arguing earlier, Olivia said. I'm on your side, Dad. Aren't you, Sophie? Yeah, I'm on Dad's side too, Sophie agreed. But what's going to happen? Where will we live? We'll stay at Grandma's house for now, Jack reassured them. I'll pick up your things from home. But for now, let's put this aside and enjoy the vacation. You deserve it. Meanwhile, back at the house, Laura watched them drive away, then took out her phone and dialed Mark. He picked up immediately. Hey, Laura. What's going on? Mark, there's a problem, Laura whispered, glancing around to make sure she was alone. Jack didn't take it the way we expected. He didn't believe me. Who didn't believe you? Jack? Mark asked. Yes. I suggested the break we talked about, and he caught on. He knows about our past, about you. He's even talking about divorce. Mark sighed heavily. That's not good. If this blows up, it'll cause a scandal at the office, and eventually, Kira will find out. I'm not interested in divorcing Jack, Laura replied. You know that. I know. But what are you going to do now? Mark asked. Jack still has to drop the girls off at my parents' place, and then he'll come home, Laura said. He'll probably be back in a few hours. Okay, Mark said. When he gets back, just stick to the plan. Tell him you've made up your mind. No break, no separation. We'll let his anger cool off. Just make sure none of this reaches the office. Laura hung up, feeling somewhat relieved after their conversation. She glanced around the house, thinking about the situation. Deciding to avoid any more trouble, she headed out to pick up some takeout for dinner. Laura also set out a bottle of wine, placing a corkscrew beside it, and arranged 2 glasses. She heated the appetizer she had picked up earlier in the microwave. As she moved to the living room, she turned on the TV and sank into an armchair. Her mind kept circling back to her brief affair with Mark, her old flame. Was it really worth risking her family over this? Now, convincing Jack would be incredibly difficult, and she wasn't sure how much he actually knew about her and Mark's relationship. She probably shouldn't have let it slip to Jack that her former classmate had become her boss. She knew Jack would find out eventually, but it still stung when she realized just how much he already knew. Jack had figured out her involvement with Mark, and that Mark had eventually broken it off. It was true. Mark had disappeared from her life only to suddenly reappear when Laura learned that he would be the new commercial director at her company. That old attraction sparked again, though she knew it was nothing more than a fling. In their first one-on-one conversation after reconnecting, Mark had been upfront. "Laura, I've always liked you, but I can't risk ruining my family. That said, I'm not ready to cut ties completely, but it needs to stay discreet. We're both married." Now, 4 hours had passed, and Jack still hadn't returned. He should have been back by now. Laura, growing uneasy, called her mom's phone. After a slight delay, her mother picked up. "Mom? Just checking in. How's everything over there?" "Daughter, we're fine. Just sitting with Grandpa. He wanted a drink, and we're having a little argument." Laura smiled, despite herself. "What's new?" "He always knows how to find that hidden bottle." Her mom chuckled. "And you? How are you doing? When are you bringing the girls over?" From the way the conversation was going, Laura realized Jack hadn't arrived yet. After hanging up, she tried calling Jack's parents. Jack's father, a retired military man, answered the phone. "Judy, is that you?" he asked sternly. "Yes, it's me. Just calling to check in on how things are going. Don't try to deceive me. You're looking for Jack and the kids, aren't you?" "He warned us about this." Laura tensed. "So, he was at your place?" "No, he didn't come. He called. Told us you're getting a divorce." "That's ridiculous. We had a misunderstanding, but divorce isn't on the table." "Judy, it's not just about you two. Jack said it's related to some guy at your job." Laura felt her heart sink. "What did he tell you?" "He said you suggested some kind of break this morning over breakfast, but when he refused, you said you'd cancel it and talk when he got back." "Is that true?" "No," Laura responded quickly. "Jack said he's done talking, that he's decided on divorce. He's gone off somewhere to think, and I have no idea where he is." Jack's father's voice remained calm but firm. "He said he's had enough, and he's taking the girls. He didn't mention where he was going. I suggested he come to sort things out face to face, but he said, 'Dad, I'm not interested. The girls are on my side.'" "Where did he go?" Laura asked, her voice cracking. "He didn't tell us. We were too upset to even ask." "Please," Laura pleaded, "if he calls, tell him I've done everything for our family. I made a mistake, but it's not what he thinks." The old man sighed. "Look, we've been married for decades, and not once did we consider separation. If you're truly in love with someone else, just pack your bags and leave. Don't ruin everyone's life." "What?" "No, there's no divorce happening," Laura insisted. "That's what you think," Jack's father said. "But I know my son better than you do. He's made up his mind. I just need to explain things to him," Laura replied, her voice desperate. "Once I do, he'll realize he's overreacting." "Whatever you think, Judy. If he calls, I'll tell him." After hanging up, Laura called Mark's phone. Unexpectedly, a woman answered. "Hello? Excuse me, I'm looking for Mark," Laura said, startled. "Who's this?" "My name is Laura. We work together." The woman scoffed. "Oh, I know who you are, honey. Let me save you some trouble. Don't bother calling him. I kicked him out." Laura froze. "What? You didn't know? Mark's a cheat, a womanizer. I've moved cities twice because of him, but not this time. I'm staying put." "Where is he?" Laura asked, panic rising. "He doesn't know where I live." "Oh, he knows everything, including your address. But he's not with me anymore, and frankly, I don't care where he is." Feeling her world spinning out of control, Laura hung up the phone, her mind racing. Meanwhile, Jack was already far away, heading to the ski resort with the girls. On the way there, Jack had made a call to an old classmate, Mike, who was now the director of the resort. He explained the situation briefly, and Mike had been quick to offer a place for him and the girls. "Anything for you, Jack? A house for 3 people, perfect for your winter getaway. Don't worry, I've got everything sorted for you." Jack smiled for the first time that day. "Thanks, Mike. I owe you one. I've got a company waiver and 3 cabins available. I'll reserve one for you, Mike said over the phone. Excellent. But I have a request. If anyone calls, please don't confirm that I'm here with my daughters on this ski trip. No problem, Mike replied. I'll reserve the cabin for you. When will you arrive? We're about an hour and a half away. The roads are slippery, so I'm driving slow. Got it. I'll set the table in your cabin. Just tell them you're here to see Mike, and they'll direct you. About an hour and a half later, Jack and the girls reached the ski lodge gates. After informing the gatekeeper they were there to see Mike, they were directed to a sheltered parking lot near the lodge. Jack parked the car, and they gathered their things before entering the cabin. Mike was already at the table when they arrived. Hurry up, everything's getting cold, he called out with a grin. Jack shook his head, smiling. You're always in a rush. Let my girls freshen up first. There are 2 bedrooms upstairs and one on the ground floor, right? Exactly. Let them settle in, Mike replied. Olivia and Sophie, already in their tracksuits, took their belongings and headed upstairs, finding the rooms to their liking. They were growing up fast, and Jack couldn't help but notice how mature they were becoming. Mike turned to Jack. Where's Laura? Why didn't she come along? That's a story for another time, Jack said. Let's toast to our reunion first. They raised their glasses and reminisced about old times, occasionally interrupted by Olivia and Sophie's questions as they explored the lodge. Eventually, Sophie asked Mike, what else is there to do around here? There's a dance party happening in the hall right now, but we didn't bring anything fancy for dancing, Olivia said. There's no dress code, Mike assured her. You can go as you are. I'll have one of the staff escort you. A few minutes later, a young staff member arrived to take Olivia and Sophie to the dance. After they left, Mike turned back to Jack. So, what's going on with Laura? You're really going through with a divorce? Jack sighed. Yeah. Remember when I used to date her? There were always rumors about her seeing someone else. I remember, Mike said, but nothing ever came of it, right? Well, this time, it's real. A guy from out of town. He's the new commercial director at Laura's job. They started an emotional affair, which I didn't catch on to at first. His wife, Kira, reached out to me, telling me everything, and now she's divorcing him. Mike leaned back in his chair. That's tough, man. So Laura cheated? No, not physically, Jack clarified. But she suggested we take a break this weekend to strengthen our marriage. I've always been skeptical of these sociological ideas, and this just confirmed it for me. Mike chuckled. Sociology? That's when people who don't understand society try to impose laws they think they've discovered. Most of it's nonsense. Exactly. And now I've decided. There's no going back. I'm moving forward with the divorce. What's your next step? Mike asked. I've contacted a group of lawyers. They're coming tomorrow. We'll figure it out. Come on, pour another drink. Let's not think about that right now, Mike said, trying to lighten the mood. Later that night, Olivia and Sophie returned from the dance, escorted by a helpful staff member. Jack prepared a late supper for his daughters, and they all ate together before heading to bed. But as Jack lay in his room, he struggled to hold back his emotions. It had been an overwhelming day, and he couldn't shake the betrayal he felt. He pulled out the tape recorder he'd been carrying and listened to the recording he'd made of Laura. It confirmed what he had feared and reassured him that his decision to divorce was the right one under the circumstances. Back at home, Laura had no idea where Jack had taken the girls. She powered on the computer Jack usually used and searched through his recent activity, trying to figure out where they might be, but found nothing about the ski lodge. She felt increasingly lost, unable to track him down. The next morning, Jack woke to the sound of knocking. Come in, he called, and Olivia and Sophie burst into the room, full of energy. Daddy, wake up. Let's have breakfast and go skiing, Olivia exclaimed. Sophie added, and there's an ice skating rink here, too. Can we go skating later? Of course. Let's get ready, Jack said with a smile. Go wash up. I'll be ready in 5 minutes. They headed to the cafe for breakfast, and afterward, they rented skis and took the lift up the mountain. The morning was spent skiing, and by lunchtime, they were back at the cafe, ready to eat. After lunch, they ran into Mike and his wife. Mike mentioned that the lawyers had arrived. Meet me at my office later. I've got everything set up, computer, printer, whatever you need, Mike said. And don't worry about the girls. My wife and her sister will take them ice skating. That sounds great, Jack said. The girls want to go dancing again tonight, so we'll join them for that. Afterward, we'll head back to the cabin. And don't forget, Mike added with a grin, tomorrow is New Year's Eve. We've got to prepare for the festivities. Everything was in place. After lunch, Jack and Mike headed to the office, where a lawyer soon arrived. They spent the afternoon discussing Jack's situation, and Maria, the lawyer, explained the legal landscape to him in detail. The lawyer advised Jack to avoid making any rash decisions about their apartment. Keep in mind, she said, that your daughters will grow up and have their own families. They'll need their own space. If you move into the apartment now, and Laura gets remarried, it could complicate things in the future. Jack nodded. But I can't imagine living in the same apartment as her. Try to envision it, she suggested, and maybe propose a petition. First, explain to Laura that you're filing for divorce in court. When will the paperwork be ready? Jack asked. There's no rush. The courts have holiday weekends too. I have my laptop with me. I'll prepare it, and we can print everything later. You can also contact me at my office or hire me to represent you in court. I like that option, Jack replied. Jack and his daughters celebrated New Year's with Mike, his wife, her sister, and a group of lawyers in the ski lodge's large hall. Other vacationers joined in, and the night was filled with music, dancing, and fun. In the early morning hours, Jack returned to the cabin with Olivia and Sophie, who were exhausted and ready for bed. After settling them in, Jack rejoined the company. Once the festivities ended, they gathered by the fireplace for a while before retiring to their respective cabins. The following days passed as planned, with more skiing, ice skating, and dancing in the evenings. At one point, Mike asked Jack, "How are you holding up?" Jack replied, aside from all the fun during the day, there were nights when I shed some tears. But today, I feel more prepared for what's ahead than ever. Finally, the day came for Jack and his daughters to pack up and head home. Before leaving, Jack had a serious conversation with his girls about the importance of not losing their apartment. They stopped at the mall for groceries on the way home and returned as the sun set. Olivia and Sophie immediately started rearranging their rooms. Sophie moved her belongings into Olivia's room. Just as they were finishing, Laura walked in. "What are you two doing?" "We're turning Sophie's room into Dad's room, and we're going to share a room," Olivia explained. Laura frowned, questioning the decision, and Sophie added, "That's what Dad said." Not satisfied, Laura warned, "I don't want any of your boyfriends hanging around here. You can hang out wherever you like, but keep it outside the house. And just so you know, I'm filing for divorce." With the room changes complete, the girls got ready for school the next morning. Meanwhile, Jack started preparing dinner and breakfast for the next day. Laura tried to initiate a conversation with him, but Jack remained unresponsive. Laura then went to the girls' room and asked if they wanted to talk. Both expressed that they hadn't really missed her. Jack had advised them to stay out of the way for the rest of the week. For the following days, Jack, Olivia, and Sophie lived separately from Laura, locking the doors to their rooms. Jack cooked for himself and his daughters, carefully ignoring Laura's presence. On Friday evening, a young woman delivered a registered letter to Laura. It was a summons with a statement of claim attached. After reading the contents, Laura rushed into the kitchen, in tears. "Why are you doing this, Jack? Why do you want a divorce? I thought we could work things out." Jack calmly advised her to speak with a lawyer. "Talk to someone who can help," he said. "Richard is gone," Laura mentioned, her voice trembling. "Maybe you should call him for advice then," Jack responded. "I don't have anyone else," Laura pleaded. Jack remained unmoved. Olivia and Sophie had already eaten and retreated to their room without saying a word to their mother. In her desperation, Laura continued to plead with Jack. "I love you," she cried. "I love you and our daughters." Jack's reply was cold. "What does love have to do with this? I loved you, Laura, but that was before I found out you'd been seeing your old boyfriend, the one you never even told me about. I realized how foolish it was to love you after that." Laura, still emotional, listened as Jack continued. "You wanted to talk, so go ahead. Tell me about your break idea. What were you planning for that weekend? How are you going to spend it? I haven't heard your brilliant sociological theories in a while, and I'm curious. Tell me how it all went down. Jack finished his dinner and began clearing the table. Hearing the clatter of dishes, Olivia entered the kitchen and offered to help. Jack refused her help, suggesting she go upstairs and tidy her room. I'll do the dishes and take care of ironing your clothes, he assured her. Laura, feeling completely ignored, went to her room in tears. After washing the dishes and turning off the lights, Jack headed to his own room. He noticed the pile of laundry he'd done over the past few days, waiting to be ironed. Before heading to bed, Jack passed through the kitchen again, where he found Laura sitting in the dark. Upon seeing him, she whispered, "Jack, none of this was planned. It just happened. I was seeing Richard back in college, and then he disappeared. I wasn't pressured into it. It just happened. No one even knew we were dating back then. He broke up with me out of the blue," Laura explained. "Then he showed up at our workplace. We started interacting because of work, and one day, he asked me to have lunch. At first, it was just lunch, nothing more. Then things changed. But from the start, he made it clear there should be no suspicious encounters, and everything had to be carefully planned so our spouses wouldn't find out. I reluctantly agreed, thinking it was just a fling with no future. This temporary separation was meant to be our first and only date. So that's why you concocted this whole story to tell me?" Jack asked, his voice tight with frustration. "I didn't realize it would go this far," Laura admitted. "I agreed to Richard's proposal. Can't you see he was just using you?" Jack shot back. "How could you be so naive?" "It's not that simple," Laura protested. "It's been a while since you've complimented me. About my looks, my clothes, even my hair." Jack shook his head. "So just because I haven't been showering you with compliments every day, you think that justifies an affair?" Laura's voice softened. "No, but I didn't feel noticed anymore." Jack's voice grew sharp. "So what? You're going to have an affair with anyone who gives you attention?" Over the next few days, Jack prepared for a meeting with child welfare officials. His lawyer, Maria, had told him that their opinion would hold significant weight in court, even though the girls' views would also be taken into consideration. Jack had a lot on his plate, and at night, when he was alone, it was hard to sleep. His thoughts kept spiraling around love and betrayal. The most important person in his life had betrayed him, leaving him filled with anger and pain. All Jack wanted now was a divorce. He had lost all trust in Laura, and their marriage felt irreparable. He also had to think about his daughters, who had distanced themselves from their mother. In one heated conversation, Laura had argued that for the children's sake, they should stay married and try to work things out. Jack's response was firm. "Our children need to know that their parents love them, no matter what. Olivia and Sophie aren't responsible for what happened. They're old enough to form their own opinions about us. And for the record, I haven't spoken ill of you to them. They made up their own minds based on what they overheard when you talked about our temporary separation." He continued, "I'm proud of our girls. They figured out what was happening between us and Richard. They've discussed it among themselves, and their decisions weren't made lightly. When we left for the ski trip, they were extremely upset with you. Talking to them changed the course of my life and plans for that weekend." Laura hesitated. "Do the girls hate me?" Jack looked at her sadly. "For someone with a degree in sociology, you don't seem to understand the situation. Yes, they know you were unfaithful. Yes, they're angry with you. You can try to repair your relationship with them, but remember, adolescence is a time of huge transitions. You know this better than most. Between the ages of 10 and 16, kids go through major physical and emotional changes. It's hard to predict how you'll be able to reconnect with them now." As the court date approached, the tension between them escalated. They had been given time to try and reconcile, but it led nowhere. Eventually, Jack proposed a child custody agreement as part of the divorce, in which the girls would live with him. After hearing everything, Laura declared, "I won't sign any agreement." Jack sighed. "Then I'll have to bring the matter before the court. The court will hear me, talk to the girls, and make a decision. It's unlikely to be in your favor." "You can't be so sure," Laura replied. "Court decisions can be appealed." "Good luck with that," Jack muttered. Laura's voice wavered. Jack, I know I've been foolish. I realize what I did was wrong. Please understand. I love you. I'll never have Richard in my life again. Jack looked at her with a weary expression. You've decided to replace him with someone else then? Fine, that's your choice. Just don't try to blame me. You're a sociologist. You should understand what this means. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a lot to deal with. He added, if you do decide to sign the agreement, we can do it in front of a notary. While it's not legally mandatory for child custody agreements to be notarized, it's a good practice since it holds the power of a court order. Thanks, but she doesn't want to sign anything, Maria said, entering the conversation. And honestly, Jack, you don't need her to sign it. It's just that she wouldn't receive anything from the settlement. As the court's deadline for reconciliation had expired, Laura's desperate attempts to reconnect with her daughters had failed. After school, Olivia and Sophie continued their computer science classes and returned home with their father. They usually had a light snack in Jack's room before settling down to do their homework. Meanwhile, Jack prepared dinner and breakfast for the next morning. One day, the child welfare authorities paid a visit. They spoke with the girls, examined their room, and compiled a report. Shortly afterward, the court hearing took place. Jack, accompanied by the girls, attended with their lawyer. Laura entered the courtroom and took her seat. She didn't have a lawyer but had sought advice from counseling and divorced friends, fully understanding that her marriage was beyond repair. During the trial, Laura responded to the court's questions briefly, usually with a simple yes or no. At the end of the trial, Laura made a significant decision. She announced that she was relinquishing her share of the apartment in favor of her daughters, providing a deed of gift. The judge noted that she had already taken her personal belongings from the apartment, and whatever remained would be removed within a week. She then requested a court recess to sign the child support agreement proposed by Jack. After the recess, Laura added, I am willing to voluntarily pay child support to Jack because I understand the court's decision may not be in my favor. Jack responded, to ensure transparency regarding the money I receive as child support, I propose that Laura open a separate account for each of the girls and transfer the funds there. I believe they'll need that money when they come of age. The judge heard both sides and clarified that alimony and the division of the apartment were not part of the initial claim, so the court wouldn't address those issues. However, the child support agreement and the divorce would be settled. The court recessed to finalize the decision. Eventually, Jack and Laura left the courthouse, officially divorced. The girls, who had been excused from the courtroom after their testimony, were found sitting on a bench near a bus stop, enjoying ice cream despite the cold weather. Seeing them, Jack asked, Girls, what are you doing? It's freezing outside. The girls smiled and explained that they had brought the ice cream home and thought it was harmless to have it in winter, saying it might even soothe a sore throat. There was a bit of irony in it, and Jack couldn't help but laugh. They also explained why 19 had been chosen as the age for accessing their savings accounts. That's what we decided, they told him. True to her word, Laura left the apartment and moved in with her parents, where she cared for her ailing mother. Jack allowed her to visit their daughters once a week, though Olivia and Sophie were hesitant at first. During these visits, Laura spent time with them at Jack's place. Epilogue. Jack spent a long time on his own after the divorce. On New Year's Eve, he and his grown daughters often vacationed at the ski resort, usually accompanied by Mike's wife's sister, Katia. Over time, Jack and Katia began to develop a relationship, but Jack wasn't in a hurry to make any commitments. For him, the most important focus in life remained his daughters, whom he continued to nurture and guide. Katia, who didn't have children of her own, got along well with Olivia and Sophie, though there was some initial jealousy on their part. Jack maintained a respectful relationship with Laura, allowing her to visit the girls regularly and keeping communication civil. However, they were no longer a couple or even friends. Olivia and Sophie matured without causing difficulties, and Jack, who surrounded his daughters with love and care, saw Katia's arrival as something that brought their family closer together. Laura had a difficult year after the divorce. Her parents passed away, one after the other. Despite the distance between them, Jack helped with the funerals, but their shared grief didn't mend their relationship. For some time, Laura lived on her own, with her daughters as her primary social circle. Eventually, She started dating a lonely widower who lived in a neighboring house. Richard, her former partner, never reappeared in town. His whereabouts remained unknown, even to his ex-wife Kira, who remarried soon after their divorce.